let's get into a piece that I have up on TexasFootball.com, which is about the biggest upsets in Texas high school football in 2020. Because, look, this time of year, upsets are on everybody's mind. Mm-hmm. This is what everybody wants to talk about. They want to talk about the big upsets. They want to talk about 13 seeds over 4s and 15 seeds over 2s and things like that. People love upsets. Except when it happens to your favorite team. That's not here. Like, for example, one of the reasons that North Texas fans were so excited is not just because they won, but also made all the more sweeter is that they were big underdogs.
Yeah, exactly.
They were the 13th seed. They were not supposed to beat Perdon't.
But
they did.
Yep.
And that's what makes it so exciting. So, we decided to take a look at the biggest upsets in Texas high school football in 2020. And we've talked a little bit on this show before about how chalky the 2020 season was on the whole. When you got to the end, if you looked back, basically
it was the Blue Bloods.
There was only one team that really shocked us, and that it won a title, and that was Jim Ned. That was like a surprise.
Windthorst a little bit.
Windthorst, but only because of the upset at the title game. You know what I mean? The fact that, Jim Ned came from, we could have said, it would not shock us if Windthorst played for a title. The fact they won the title was not necessarily what was more of the surprise. But otherwise, pretty chalky. Mm-hmm. But we decided to take a look at where the biggest upsets of the year came from. And to do this, of course, we have our computer projections on TexasFootball.com, where you can see each week the computer tells you what it thinks is going to happen in every Texas high school football game each week. So 600-plus games every week. They will tell you, hey, here's what we think is going to happen. Mm-hmm. Now, the computer's not perfect, obviously. And as we've just explained on the air, it calibrates with every.
It's an unfeeling robot.
With every result, it kind of calibrates, and so if you overachieve their expectations, then it's going to expect more of you the next time, and if you underachieve, they're going to expect less of you. So one thing I think is interesting is it's a lot of stuff early in the year. A lot of stuff early in the year, which I think can be counted as at least a little bit of a calibration error with one team in particular that we'll talk about. So, without further ado, here were the teams that overcame the biggest projected margins to win their games in 2020. And it starts up at the top with a 6-man game with Westbrook's win over Motley County. This was in week 1, and I remember they were 46-point underdogs according to the computer. And I remember sitting up and paying attention to this because Motley County, of course, was the reigning state runner-up. They had Jake Richards back. They were supposed to be this big time juggernaut. Westbrook had won 6 games in the previous 2 years combined. This was a Westbrook team that we didn't think a ton of. It turns out Motley County pretty good, but Westbrook ended up being a lot better than we thought they would. Motley County was coming off a run to a title game, and that was, to me, there's another game. In fact, if you go down, technically there were a bunch of games that were tied for 10th. Because they were 31-point underdogs.
Yeah. I wondered why you went with top 9. I'm not going to lie.
One of those, because I can't fit, 15.
15 teams, yeah.
But one of them was there's another Westbrook game in week 2 when they beat Borden County. They were 31-point underdogs in that one. They pulled stunners in back-to-back weeks, but they had the biggest upset of the year with their 46-point win. From 6-man to 6A, you find the second biggest upset, which was North Mesquite beating Mesquite Horn. And I got to be honest, I still don't understand this one. North Mesquite came out swinging. North Mesquite looked fantastic in this. They jumped out to a 23-13 lead, ended up taking down Mesquite Horn. And by the way, that was North Mesquite's last win of the year. Now, Mesquite Horn, I think, was not as good as we thought they were going to be. I think they and this was kind of the first kind of signal of that. But North Mesquite's win was a 42-point upset there, and the biggest 11-man upset of the year.
I remember us looking at that score on the website and thinking
it's got to be backwards.
Yeah, it's got to be messed up. Something went wrong. Hey, Will, you should go check on that.
Reagan County beat Ozona in week 3, and that was a huge upset. Got a huge game from Jacob Gallegos. They were 37-point underdogs. You got a pair of games that were 35-point upsets. Norman G beating Bremond. That was back in week 1. Bremond ended up having a decent year, but Norman G was a team. They served notice to the state. when they ended up finishing 11-1. This was really the catalyst for that, and the first sign that Norman G's something serious when they were 35-point underdogs and beat Bremond. And then another 6-man game, Zephyr's win over Paint Rock. Now this is, I mentioned this in the article. I think this comes with a 2020 asterisk, which is Paint Rock had not played the previous 3 weeks.
Okay.
And I think they had a COVID-19 outbreak, and so they weren't able to play. And so they get back on the field. They were big favors over Zephyr. Ended up, I think, coming out flat and losing. I mean, it was a 51-6 upset win.
Right.
So I put a small asterisk next to that one because that feels a little bit different.
I was going to say, and you've got to, like, maybe this isn't right, but you got to think that probably affects a 6-man team a lot more than it affects someone.
Oh, most certainly. Because even if they still have 1 or 2 guys out, those could be important players.
You don't have the roster, and 2, if you're all suspended, then no one's working out, not only just, what select position group.
Abilene Wiley's win over Brownwood was a 34-point upset. Kearns' win over Dawson was a 34-point upset as well. Cleveland Tarkington, when they took down Cold Spring Oakhurst, they were 32-point underdogs. And then finally one more 6-man game with Water Valley's win over Highland. That was the also 32-point underdogs. As I mentioned, there were 5 games that were 10th that tied for 10th place. They were 31-point dogs. Rio Vista's season opening win over Santo. Liberty's win over Madisonville, which is still, I believe, 4A's biggest upset. Westbrook, and then their win over Borden County. Buena Vista beating Grand Falls Royalty, and then Nevada Community with their shocker over Grapevine Faith Christian. That's up on TexasFootball.com. But there's one other thing that I wanted to note, and this is in the piece as well. There were, to me, not to me, I can phrase it this way. There were 4 double-digit playoff upsets as well. The biggest upset in the playoffs was Weslaco East's, or rather San Antonio Southwest, beating Weslaco East in the area round of the 5A Division I playoffs. The computer had them as 22-point underdogs in that game, and the Dragons ended up coming out with that win over Weslaco East. Alvord and their 35-7 really shocking upset over Italy in 2A Division I in an area round. That was a 15-point upset.
Especially because Italy did so well the week beforehand.
Oh, absolutely. And then finally, there were 2 6A Division I by-district games in the Houston area that were both upsets. Jersey Village, when they beat Bel Air, Houston Bel Air in the first round, and then Klein Oak when they beat Cy Ranch, they were both 13-point underdogs in those games. So those are the biggest upsets in 2020 on TexasFootball.com. You can find them. Let us know what you think is the biggest upset in Texas high school football in 2020.
Well, and it's funny, too, because I agree, there is a difference, too, between what we're classifying as an upset here is literally point spread differential.
We're using a cold, unfeeling robot to determine this.
Exactly.
Yes.
But Rob Hadaway brought up, obviously you look at a South Lake Carroll over Duncanville game or Westlake over North Shore, and it's those are the upsets that are going to stick in your mind probably the most, but this is literally from an analytical standpoint.
Oh, no, most certainly, but here's the thing, and he's exactly right. If you take a look at Westlake's win over North Shore, the computer had them as 1-point underdogs. The computer thought that was a super close game, and the computer ended up being really right. It's 24-21. They were spot on. The other one, what you mentioned was South Lake Carroll. South Lake Carroll beating Duncanville. Now, that is an upset. Duncanville was and actually, I don't know why that didn't show up on my computer. But Duncanville was a 14-point favorite in that game. So that is another one of those playoff upsets. It's a double-digit upset. So that was a double-digit upset as well. I don't know why that didn't show up. All just my piece. So those are there. The other one that I think people are going to come yelling about is the 2A Division II title game, right? Windthorst over Mart. The computer had that as again, another 14-point upset. So I need to adjust that. I don't know why that didn't show up. But those were ones that I think were they were surprising. And so I'm going to figure out why that didn't show up on my Excel document. But I will say that those are, I think, especially once you get that deep in the playoffs, I tend to think that every team here is pretty darn good.
Right.
And so maybe those aren't as big of upsets. You know what I mean? Like if I'm trying to think of what's going on in basketball. Who's Baylor playing this week in basketball?
I can't remember.
Whoever they're playing. If Baylor's a pretty good team. They're a 1 seed, right? But if they were to lose in the Sweet 16, it would be an upset. I think every team that they're playing right now is pretty darn good.
Yeah, the only one that you look at typically would be like Oral Roberts, who was a 15th seed coming in. Like, no matter how far they get, everyone's going to consider that an upset, no matter how much they prove themselves. But yeah, if you've got a 1 going up against a 3 seed, clearly it's just good basketball,
Yes,
you know?
Sure. So there you go. Those are the biggest upsets in 2020 in Texas high school football.